First, I'd just like to acknowledge the Turrbal people, the traditional owners of the land on which this event is taking place, and the elders both past and present. We've got a lot to get through, so I'll just get onto the agenda. First off, our Chief Executive, Mary York, will give us a brief business update before handing over to our Group Manager for Strategies and Planning, Stuart Bell, who will give us a bit of an overview of the Transmission Annual Planning Report. We have an overview document on the table in front of you. There'll then be the opportunities to ask some questions about either Merrin's or Stuart's presentation. We'll then break for morning tea at 10 o'clock. Morning tea will be back out in that foyer area where you first gathered. And we'll have about 20 minutes before we then get into our breakout sessions. We've got a lot to get through, so if I can just ask people to respect our times and acknowledge those breaks and come back into the room, that would be greatly appreciated. We are also, after your participation on social media, so we will be doing some live social media posting from today. We are using the hashtag PQ Forum. One member of our team, Joss, I'm not sure where she is, but oh, there she is. Sorry, I'm blinded by these lights. If you see Joss going around, she'll be there just doing some interesting comments and thoughts and putting it out through our Twitter feed. We also encourage you to follow Powerlink on both our Twitter and Facebook feed, which the details are there. Just in terms of some housekeeping, as you'll notice that we are doing some video recording today and some professional photography. The reason for that is, for those of you who attended last year, we do make a copy of all these presentations available on our website in the coming weeks. We believe it's a good way of sharing this information that is discussed to a wider audience than those people who are actually here in person today. If you have any questions or dramas about that, please come and see either myself or one of the Powerlink team. In terms of just emergencies exits, if we have to evacuate in the case of an emergency, there are 2 points. We have an emergency exit over here to my right through the doors, and then back out through Chelsea Lane. If you go past those magnificent BMW vehicles, don't get too distracted. If we do have to evacuate, we probably will have to move. I know it will be tempting though to stop and look. I do just want to acknowledge Brisbane BMW and for them bringing along those 2 beautiful cars. They're just, technologically, they are unbelievable cars, and from a transmission network provider, we actually really are embracing new technology, and we believe that the transmission network is going to play a really important part in terms of not only supporting technology like we see in those cars, but new technology that hasn't even been thought of yet. And we believe that the transmission network will play a really important role in terms of enabling that future development of technology in this space. So without further ado, I'll just hand over to our Chief Executive, Mary York, to provide a business update.
Thanks, Jared, and welcome everyone. It's great to see so many people here. For those of you that I don't know or haven't met, I look forward to the opportunity to catch up with you during the break as we work through the sessions. And I'd also like to just express my appreciation up front for coming along to this session today. Jared didn't say it, but I will. This isn't a free lunch. We do want some input from you, and we'll be talking about that more as we work through the breakout sessions, because your input is really, really valuable to us to make sure that we are responding to the needs of all of the people that operate in this electricity sector. So first up, a very quick business update. So I want to talk first a little bit about our regulated business, and this of course is the part of our network that really provides that reliable and cost-effective electricity transmission service. So we're a small part of the electricity bills that people pay, comes back to us about 9%. You guys who operate in the electricity sector will know as well as I do that there is continuing change occurring in our industry, and so as a transmission entity, we need to make sure that we are responding to that change and that we are taking that into account in the way in which we think about our regulated network and the way it develops. We are trying to make sure that we have the greatest awareness of that, and that's part of what we want to get your input into, so that we can develop innovative solutions that will support the Queensland economy and also ensure that we can enable people's lifestyles. We all know what it would be like if we didn't have electricity. Life would be a lot grimmer than it is if we don't have that electricity supply to our homes and businesses. And really part of that is making sure that we're focused on delivering better value for customers. And Stuart's going to talk more about some of the alternative practices that we're putting in place to try to make sure that we are delivering better value for customers as we make sure that the network is developed and maintained to provide that reliable supply, but at a lower cost than what it might have been in the past. So that's something we're very focused on, and Stuart will be covering more of that as he works through the details of the actual transmission annual planning report. But just in terms of a high level, many of you may know that we are in the process of getting our revenue determination for our next 5-year period. So our revenue proposal in a snapshot, this is under evaluation by the AER at the moment, but just to give you a sense of what we've actually proposed, we're putting forward our forecasts that will deliver a lower maximum allowed revenue, and we're actually asking for 14% less revenue in the next 5-year regulatory period than what we have in the current 5-year regulatory period. That's over the 5 years. There'll be a 25% drop in the first year of that next regulatory period, which is 17-18, and that translates to about a 28% drop in indicative transmission charges. If we translate that into household residential bills, that will be something like a $22 to $37 reduction in that average household bill, and that will depend on the tariffs that individual households are on. The way we're actually delivering that is through lower operating cost, 7% reduction over the next 5 years compared with the current 5 years, a 31% reduction in our CapEx over the next 5 years compared with the current, and contributing to that is also a lower rate of return, and we've very much taken a position that we will adopt the AER's guidelines and follow the approach that the AER has put out, and the rate of return is no exception to that. So we're forecasting a reduction in the rate of return from 8.61% that we have in the current period to 6.04% in the next period. So when you put all that together, that delivers that 28% reduction in the indicative transmission price in the first year of our next regulatory period. In terms of the timetable around that, we submitted in our proposal to the AER in January this year. Submissions were invited on that and they closed on the 28th of April, so the AER is currently in its evaluation phase, and we're expecting to get a draft determination from the AER sometime in September this year. Once we know what that looks like, we then have an opportunity to develop a revised revenue proposal, taking into account whatever the AER has said in its draft determination, and the AER must make its final determination by April 2017, and our new regulatory period will commence on the 1st of July 2017. So that's a little bit about the timetable that's going on that affects our regulated business. I just want to turn to renewable energy because this is certainly something that's very active in the electricity sector at the moment, is a lot of renewable energy, and of course this follows on from the finalisation of the large-scale renewable energy target, and of course there's now bipartisan support for that, so we have the confidence that that policy position is going to be sustained over time. And so renewable energy is a key focus for Powerlink, is to enable that renewable economy going forward. And what I mean by that is really to provide information, to provide information out to people who might be thinking about renewable energy, so that that renewable energy can take what is available on the transmission network into account in terms of thinking about where they want to connect, what size power station or solar farm or wind farm they might be thinking about, and how they can actually connect into our network to make sure that we can take that forward, managing things like intermittency, So the transmission platform, the transmission network can be a platform that allows for diversity of both renewable energy type and also geography to help to manage that intermittency that we know is a characteristic of renewable generation. And we're also flagging an opportunity for people to potentially share connection assets through some kind of clustering model or creating renewable energy zones. We have already established arrangements where people connecting to our network can share assets. They get benefits from that in terms of lower connection costs, which we know is important for renewable generators, and that also allows them to make sure that they're getting the best value from the way in which they connect. So these are a couple of ways that as a transmission network we can help to facilitate the renewable economy and that transition to a lower carbon future that is part of the community's desire. We think about those types of connections, that is done as non-regulated networks, so that does not form part of our regulated business, and we need to deal with that in a different way. So Powerlink has for many years established connections for people, and I know there's many people in the room here who are already talking to Powerlink about that. So opportunities for connection solutions for people is something that we're very focused on. We've delivered more connections than any other transmission entity in Australia, so we're very experienced at that, and we have that ability to share those connection assets and create better value for the renewable generators that are connecting, which will ultimately deliver better value for the electricity industry in general. We also have other solutions that we provide around telecommunications, oil and insulation testing, asset management, property services, and we're really looking to expand that. And we've got a new brochure that is available out in the foyer. If you'd like to pass by the stand towards this end of the foyer outside, you'll see there's a brochure there that actually outlines a number of the services that Powerlink provides. The final thing that I just want to touch on in my introduction is related to stakeholder engagement, and this forum and the fact that it's not a free lunch and we do want your input is part of our stakeholder engagement arrangements, where we really want to proactively engage with people in the industry. We want to get your input, we want to hear from you what your issues are, and we want to see how we can take those into account in developing what we need to do as a transmission entity to then support the whole electricity industry, but do that in a cost-effective and reliable way. So we want to have your input. We'll feed back to you how we've taken that into account through greater transparency. And just to give you a sense of that, many of you might have been here last year when we ran this forum. One of the breakout sessions we had was related to our revenue proposal, which we submitted in January. And we actually have taken the feedback from the forum into account in developing that revenue proposal around things like our OPEX, our CAPEX, the rate of return that we've set, but also in the way in which we've developed area plans. I know last year we talked about the Brisbane area plan. The input that we got from this forum was taken into account, and if you have a look at our revenue proposal, or you've been working with us closely through our customer and consumer panel, you will have received some of the information about how we took that input and how we actually factored that into the proposal and the other decisions that we make as a business. So I'm really looking forward to getting your input again today so that we can use that in our business direction going forward and make sure that we are taking into account and aware of the things that matter the most to the electricity sector, because that's how we best support you. Well, that's it from me. I'm going to hand over to Stuart, who's going to talk you through more of the details of the actual transmission annual planning report.
Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see so many people interested in the Queensland electricity industry. So in Powerlink's transmission and planning report. So I'll go through some of the key highlights for you. And so I'll talk through the demand and energy forecasts and the methodologies and approach we've been doing. I'll also talk through our network development outlook. So what type of projects are we currently undertaking, and what projects do we see happening over the next 5 and 10 years And I'll talk just a little bit more about the detail of some of our key investments. There's a lot of detail in the TAPR, so I'll pull out some of the key points. Just want to reflect on some of the improvements though that we've made in the last 12 months in the TAPR. So we continue to enhance our demand and energy forecasting methodologies. It's an ongoing process as we enhance and improve those. We had a demand and energy forecasting forum where we got industry experts came to Powerlink back in March, where we discussed the future drivers of some of this electricity consumption, in particular the impacts of new technology. And we took the input from that discussions and we've actually then reflected that into our methodology. I'll talk through a little bit of detail of that in a minute. We've also enhanced our non-network engagement, and fundamentally Powerlink will recognise that we don't want to be building network for short bursts of peak demand, but we'd much rather use non-network solutions, and that will improve the overall utilisation on our network. So we're improving our efforts in that non-network space to look at opportunities. And we've actually got a session on non-networks after morning tea where we'll investigate and discuss some of those items. And we've also got a new chapter, so chapter 7 in the Transmission Annual Planning Report. First time we had a new chapter for many years, and it's looking at renewables. And renewables are very topical at the moment. We've got the Queensland Government looking at their energy target of 50% renewables by 2030. We've actually got over 40 applications to connect solar PV to our transmission network at the moment. So there's a lot of interest about connecting to the network and about renewables. And so understanding that, we've added a new chapter. And again, we've got a breakout session after morning tea, which will be in this room where we'll discuss further those opportunities. Now, before I talk about the future, I just want to probably look back a little bit in the past. So these are demand curves from our peak demand days 6 years ago and peak demand day we had this year. So this is a 24-hour period. That's night time over the afternoon and back. You can see the overall shape. It's about the same. In fact, the good news is that Queenslanders are using more electricity than they were 6 years ago. So we can actually see that the demand has actually increased. But it's when you actually then look at the layers underneath that, you can actually see some significant change. So the mustard coloured there, that relates to the electricity that's being provided by the solar PV. So you can see 6 years ago there was very little solar PV on the network. Now there's a considerable amount. You can see how that's moving our peak demand on our network to later in the day. The green part, that's the other embedded generation and distribution. So that's stayed pretty similar in the last 6 years. And then the grey colour, you can see that's the new LNG connections. And you can see there's about 400 megawatts of LNG load that we didn't have 6 years ago. And that's pretty steady during night and day. And then the blue part is, well, that's what's transmitted over our transmission network. And you can see a significant change. So you can actually see that the demand on our network has actually dropped over that 6 year period. And the energy component is reduced significantly. So you can see the peak is now, for a shorter duration, more heading towards the evening rather than the whole afternoon. So it's just sort of interesting just to reflect back on the change we've had in the last 6 years as we look forward for what might change over the next 10. So forecasting methodology, how do we do demand and energy forecasting? So there's three main components. So the first is we go and talk to our direct connect customers, and they provide us their demand and energy forecast for the next 10 years. So they provide that, so we take that. We also run economic models to look at the DNSP, what's happening in the DNSP world. So we'll look at a whole raft of economic variables. This year we used Queensland retail turnover and electricity price, but we looked at a whole raft of other variables at the same time, but we'll focus on those two. We use those along with history to forecast what the future will look like. But we do know that history may not be a perfect indicator of what the future will be like. So we've actually built in some assumptions explicitly about new technologies. So we've actually said, well, what's different in the future, such as maybe more solar PV, battery storage, and we've actually made those assumptions explicit and added them to our model. I think I said this time last year, and I'll say it again, it's never been a harder time to forecast electricity demand. Back 10 years ago, it was much easier. You just drew a straight line and moderated it slightly with economic growth. So now it's far more complex. So what we've actually done, though, we've actually put the model, published our model on the website, so you can actually see all the assumptions that we've made. And if you have an alternate view, or you think you've got a better view on a particular item going forward, then you can actually change that variable in the Excel spreadsheet. You can actually then see what the impact will be. So we're being very transparent in our forecasting approach. I think that's the best thing we can do in this period of uncertainty. We look at the major customers component. So it's really looking at the LNG, the smelters, the rail. So we take their forecasts. But just want to make sure that there's only committed load that we've added into the medium forecast. There's still quite a bit of activity, about 1,300 megawatts of mining and industrial load that are still interested in connecting to our network. But given that they're not committed, we haven't added them to our base case or our medium scenario. That's probably indicative that there is still some pent-up demand should economic conditions change. And I've got a table up here. This is showing the breakdown of some of the assumptions we made in this new technology space. So let's talk you through some of this just briefly. Solar PV, so we're forecasting to have about 4,300 megawatts of solar PV on the distribution network in 10 years' time. Now, that's not going to have a huge impact on our demand above what we've already got. As I said, we're moving towards an evening peak, so once we reach that in a couple of years' time, then adding more and more solar PV is not actually going to impact on peak demand. But it will continue to impact on energy. So we're looking at a significant part of energy being delivered through solar PV rather than over our transmission network. Battery storage, probably similar to the assumption we had last year. We had quite a debate and discussion about this at the demand forecasting forum earlier in the year. Some thought that the 240 megawatts was a little bit high, and some thought it was a little bit low. So it was quite an interesting, and it's probably a very dynamic area. But will provide a lot of benefit to networks in that it will actually allow us to trim the maximum demand, but also energy will be about the same, which will improve the network improve the utilisation of the network. Electric vehicles. So Nathan from BMW should not panic. This does not mean that you don't sell an i8. I'm sure you'll sell a few. But from a demand perspective, I would expect that in the next 10 years, we'll be able to charge the majority of our electric vehicles off peak. I would assume that the incentives will be there so that people don't drive home after work, plug in their car just at the time of evening peak. I'm sure we'll be smart enough and we'll actually have some off-peak charging of them. And as such, we haven't put an offset for demand. Energy-wise, probably from a state perspective, electric vehicles won't have a huge impact. Even if you had 5% of all of Queensland's cars, if 5% of all of them were electric vehicles, you'd probably see a change of maybe energy statewide by maybe 1.5%. So not a huge impact statewide. I must say though, in down distribution, I probably see that you'll end up with electric cars in particular suburbs, and that'll prove a bit challenging for the distribution guys, but statewide it should be alright. Energy efficiency. So last year we had an offset for energy efficiency, and we've removed it this year. Got some feedback again as part of that forum that there's some consultancy and reports produced looking at energy efficiency, and we've had significant amounts of improvements from energy efficiency in the last probably 3 or 4 years. People moving from halogen lights to LEDs, introduction of pink bats to improve our insulation. So they're all been factored into the data that we've used as part of our economic modelling. And the report was saying that to have further energy efficiencies above that trend is unlikely. So based on that, we've removed that offset, we've put it down to 0. Tariff reform and demand side management. As I said, over the next 10 years we expect that there'll be incentives for people to move their consumption away from time of peak. And that's an assumption which is very similar to last year's. Again, we'll see that more of a transfer of use rather than a reduction of use, so no impact on energy. And we've also got a new factor we've added in this year as well, which is the customer momentum factor. We added that because we were looking through what the economic model was producing. It was actually showing that the forecast was for moderating electricity prices over the next 10 years. And the model then took that as that there'll be a bounce back in both demand and energy. So demand energy has been brought down because of the increases in electricity prices in recent years. And the model then was saying, well, hang on, prices are now going to moderate. Electricity, both energy and demand, is going to bounce back. And when we were reviewing the model, we thought, well, hang on, does this feel right? It really depends on how customers are going to react. And we just kind of reflected back on what happened with the water restrictions. So a few years back we had water restrictions, so we stopped watering our lawns, we stopped watering our driveways. Then the water restrictions were taken away, but the actual water use didn't bounce back to its original amount. And we see probably a similar thing will happen with electricity. So we dampened that component of the model. So we only took a 2/3 weighting of that part. So that third weighting we've taken off, which will impact both demand and energy. What's this done to our energy forecast? So you can see the forecast we had back in 2015 and the forecast we have this year. And you can see the total energy is forecast still relatively flat and low, but slightly less than what we said last year. Now that's a function of what's happened in LNG. So the LNG is a significant ramp up in energy last year. So a lot of that growth was all going to happen last year, which did occur. But also we're seeing with the LNG guys now running their plant and understanding how they're going to run them, they've actually updated their forecast, and they've actually dropped their energy forecast as well. So those two factors are showing that we've got now a 0.6% growth in energy, which is basically flat. And when you look at underlying growth, taking LNG out of it, it's the same as last year. This is what it looks like on a graph. So the blue line is history, the green line is what was in the TAPR last year, and the red line is what's in the TAPR this year. And what you'll see there is, you look there of our actual versus our forecast. So energy growth last year was about 3% less than what we forecast. So taking that into account and the revised LNG customer forecasts, the energy going forward is less than what we forecast last year. ramp up of LNG is nearly complete. You can still see another year of ramp up. And after that, it's relatively flat outlook. Similar story when you look at the maximum demand. So this is both the summer and the winter maximum demand. So again, you can see relatively flat growth going out, similar to last year. A bit of a change in the total, and that was driven by the LNG, so the growth we had last year and our demand forecasts coming down. But as I say, that looks relatively flat. This is in graphical form. So what's different with the demand one is you can see the actual dots, so that's based on actual demand. The blue line relates to temperature corrected. So we take the actual demand and then we work out whether it was a particularly hot day, and then we'll actually normalise it to a medium day. If it was a particularly cool day, the maximum demand occurred on, then we'll actually revise the demand upwards. So this year we had a maximum demand of 8271 megawatts, which was about 1% higher than what we forecast. But the actual maximum demand day was a particularly hot day, so we actually had to correct it down to an average day and dropped it down. So the actual temperature corrected was about 1% below what we forecast. So pretty much in line with what the forecast was. And again, you can see a little bit more ramp up to come with the LNG, and then after that it's relatively flat. AEMO, so AEMO also do demand and energy forecasts, so they do that across the state, and they also produce one for Queensland. So this is just doing a comparison of ours versus AEMO's, which was published last month. So again, the shape's pretty similar. The AEMO is slightly higher, so when you look at it, it's about say 600 megawatts higher at the end of the 10-year period. When you look at do a comparison between the two, probably the main drivers I can see is that AEMO are forecasting probably about 300 megawatts higher LNG load at the end of the 10-year period. And we also have a customer momentum factor, which we're saying we're not seeing that bounce back of electricity because the price will moderate. So we've added that, so it's about 300 megawatts. So you take those two together, and that accounts for the majority of the difference. From an energy perspective, we're very, very similar. In fact, you very nearly think we've been copying each other. But when you actually look at just below that and say, well, what are the particular drivers there? There are some differences. So the AEMO forecast has about 2,000 gigawatt hours more for LNG load than what Powerlink's forecast has, which means that our forecast must have about 2,000 gigawatt hours higher DNSP load than what AEMO's got. So those two are cancelling out and make them pretty much the same. But as I say, it's never been harder to forecast, and I'm not saying that ours is better from than the AEMO's. It's just different. One thing for sure, they're both forecasts, and they'll both be wrong. So, but again, our model's on the website, and you go and have a look at it. If you have a better assumption than we have, and by all means you can make those changes. Generation outlook. So from a centralised generation perspective, not much change compared to what we were flagging last year. So Swanbank E is still out the market, and Toorong returned to market as we predicted last year. And it's probably in response, you can see that we've had an increase in our demand, mainly driven by the LNG industry, so it's now taken about 450 megawatts of load. So if the load's increased, but at the same time, with the start of the export of gas, gas prices then become a little bit more expensive. So you can see the winding down of the gas generation, centralised gas generators. So here's where it's behind the Toorong came back in service earlier this year. we're actually doing our planning and then saying, okay, we'll take the demand and energy forecast and say, well, what type of network do we need for the future? We're very much taking an integrated approach. So we've got, in my particular area, I look after both the planning function and also the teams that look after the end of life of assets. So teams are working very, very close together and taking a very much an integrated view of what we need to meet our demand and energy requirements going forward. And in particular, a lot of our projects, you see demand's flat, so we're not building much for augmentations. A lot of our projects are related to replacements and reinvestments, and very much challenging when a thing comes to an end of life. Well, what do we replace it with? The first question the guys ask is, say, well, given the way the network has grown over the last 14, 50 years, do we actually need that asset at all? Can we use the amended planning standard, the network, how it's been grown over the last 20 and 30 years? Can we reconfigure it and actually take the network out? We're doing that. We're doing that obviously in accordance with the DNSPs. So working very closely with Argonne and Energic. So they've obviously got aging assets as well. So how do we work together to get the optimal outcome for all of Queensland LC users? A couple of examples. We've got a line from Mackay to Proserpine. So it's come to its end of life, and we're busy now taking that out of the network. And we're actually then feeding Proserpine and Mackay from other parts of the network. Doing similar things at Calladay, so a substation which has come to its end of life, and we're now looking at how do we reconfigure that to meet the needs of our customers in the Gladstone area. Just a couple of examples where we're doing things slightly different. Again, with that big focus on price and how to manage price, but also with an eye to reliability. And obviously we'll still operate the network to maximise reliability to customer and consumers. So transmission outlook is no emerging peaks over the next 5 to 10 years from an augmentation perspective. The majority of our investments will be about replacing assets. But as I say, it won't be like-for-like replacements. We're looking at how do we reconfigure the network to achieve the right outcome. And we've still got an eye for, I dare say, future plausible outcomes. There's a lot of change happening in the space of renewables. I see transmission performing a big role in that, managing the intermittency of renewables. And I would expect renewables to be connected right across Queensland. So we're cognizant of that. So we're just keeping that in mind when we're doing the consolidation and reconfiguration of the network. Next few slides, just talking about some of our completed projects or projects we've had in train or projects we're about to start. So there's more detail obviously in the TAPR, and I just want to pull out some of the key ones for you. Probably the big project from Powerlink's perspective. Been working on this for probably over 5 years now, and it was Australia's largest non-regulated transmission project, where we connected up the 3 gas components out the Surat Basin. So that project was completed last year, and it was a great outcome for both Powerlink, the LNG components, and also Queensland energy consumers, because it's actually then helped boost the demand across the network. As Merrin mentioned, we're looking at options for part of a shared network. So the customers, they pay for these connections. But we actually worked with the 3 proponents and actually looked at where they could actually share part of that network as well to help reduce their costs. And that's the first time that's been done in Australia, so we're very proud of that. And then you look at some of the statistics. Huge project, $500 million, 7 substations, over 200 kilometres of line. So yeah, no, we've been huge project and a great outcome. Reinvestment projects we have in progress. So we've got a number of secondary systems, substations, and increasingly line refits where we're doing life extensions on our transmission lines. Our secondary systems typically last between 15 and 20 years, substations between around about 40 to 45 years, and transmission lines, depending on the environment, sometimes just about before 50 years, sometimes more if it's in a less corrosive environment. So you can imagine we collect the river to Boyne Island, very much in a coastal area. So those lines are now at a point in their age that they're suffering from severe corrosion, and we've got a project on foot to sort that. And looking out over the next 5 years, we've got a mix of projects in the secondary systems, a few in the substations and also in the transmission lines, and again across all of Queensland. So we've got over 130 substations and 14,000 circuit kilometres of line, so there's an ongoing need for replacement and renewal of those assets. And we'll be working towards that over the next 5 and 10 years. If you remember back to Merlin's slide at the beginning, our CapEx expenditure over the next 5 years will be 30% lower than our expenditure in the last 5. So will be less, but there's still an ongoing need from a reinvestment perspective. And finally, the non-network opportunities. So up at Garbutt, we've got 2 transformers, early to mid-40s, have come to end of life. Now, we recognise we need to replace one of them, but as part of that non-network drive, it's like, well, hang on, do we need to replace the second one? Are there non-network solutions in the Garbutt area which we could employ and not actually replace that second transformer? So we went out to the market earlier this year to canvass and see, well, what are the opportunities? We've got a number of responses to that, and now we're working our way through those particular responses, and we'll publish the findings next month. So as I say, a session just after morning tea, we'll talk about non-network and how we could better engage. If there's anything additional that we need to do in that space, because we see non-network solutions as being particularly important going forward. Invite Merlin and Gerard back to the stage. Any questions?
Thanks, Stuart, for a great presentation. So we have about 10 or so minutes just to take any questions from the floor. If you could just probably put your hand up. We do have some roving microphones, so maybe just wait until a microphone has come over to you. But this is your opportunity now to ask any questions of Stuart. There was a lot of information that he went through there. Any questions regarding what was in the TAPR, or any questions to Merrin regarding that overarching business update or the strategy of where Powerlink is going. So I think we do have our roving mics in place. So who has the first question? Yes.
Thank you. My question is to Merrin and the team, but over the years we hear nothing but negative press about embedded solar, but obviously you're getting by now with a lot less development of new transmission into southeast Queensland, even with the withdrawal of generation. So can you quantify how much benefit there has been to grid expenditure from embedded solar over the years?
That's a big question just off the top of my head. Thank you, Ian. Look, obviously I can't quantify that right now off the top of my head, but to give you some sense, and probably the best way I could give you a sense of that is the reduction in our forecast capital expenditure. So in our next 5-year regulatory period, which commences middle of 17, we have virtually no growth capital expenditure. I think, detail of it is we've got one capacitor bank up in
Proserpine. So in terms of the impact of a range of things, solar, rooftop solar being just one of them, that has driven a complete change in terms of the growth, and the forecast reflects that. So we have had, going back 30 years before, probably about 2010, 30 years of growth, and that has driven growth that has to be met by the transmission network and generation. We're not seeing that going forward. We're seeing a flat outlook, and so there is effectively no growth demand. I don't think that we could attribute all of that to rooftop solar PV, because there's obviously been changes in consumer behaviour, and there's been technology changes, as well as other embedded generation, economic changes and all that kind of thing. But solar PV would certainly be in the mix of that, and it's really part of the lack of growth capex in our network going forward. So that's a part of an answer. I don't know that we would ever be able to do detail analysis to say, well, this bit's for solar rooftops, this bit's for other things. I think that would be a very complicated thing to try to calculate.
Actually, just adding a little bit further, you can see in the graphs I showed there, there's probably about 400 megawatts of peak support we're getting from embedded solar just now. So obviously that great support to the network. But what you'll see is it's moving to an evening peak. So as we add in another 1,000 megawatts of solar PV, we'll get some benefit. But after that, once we've reached that evening peak, then the benefits won't be so great. And that's why it's really important where we can embrace storage, so we can actually then start to use or fill up the batteries during the day when we've got excess solar, and then use it to trim the evening peak.
Any other questions? Down the front here, Mark.
Mark Renning, EUAA. Question first to Merrin. You put up, I think it's a 28% reduction in the revenue proposal for the next 5 years, and you had 3 reasons. One was lower OPEX, one was lower CAPEX, and one was lower WACC. Are you able to tell us how much of that 28% reduction was due to each of those 3 factors?
I don't have the detail here that I could give you a breakdown, but we can talk to you.
I just wondered how much of it is actually due to the change in WACC versus the change in capital and operating costs.
Well, it's all 3 things together actually drive that change, but obviously there'd be different components contributing different things, and I don't have the details here to hand, but overall that package aligned with what we've put forward in terms of complying with the range of AER guidelines that exist to guide revenue determinations contribute in total to that variation between the last period and this period.
Okay, and a question to Stuart, and I'll understand if you want to avoid this question, but the obvious thing to me when I looked at those 2 graphs about 2010 and 2016 is that we need to introduce daylight saving in Queensland. And I wondered how much capital would be saved if you had an extra hour of sunlight so that solar could make a greater contribution to that moving peak you talked about.
Me personally, I would love daylight saving. I've just come back from Scotland where nice light evenings. So you might get a little bit of benefit. Again, what you do is you defer the moving of that evening peak, and you get a bit more benefit from the solar PV. But once you get to that tail end of the afternoon period, the benefit's probably not huge, but it would be beneficial from an electricity perspective.
Just to clarify, that's Stuart's personal opinion and not Powerlink's corporate position on that. Any other questions?
It's Chris Wheeler. I've got a question for Stuart. In terms of the changed reliability standard to N-1 minus 50, has Powerlink experienced that in its operating regime over the period since that's been introduced? And if not, when do you actually start to see the network uptaking that particular opportunity of reduced reliability standard?
So from firstly, the main thoughts when we introduced that was, well, it would when you get augmentations, it would defer the augmentations. But because we've had relatively flat demand, we haven't had that augmentations to defer. What we have found is that we're using that new reliability standard when we're looking at reconfiguration options as part of the replacements. And in a couple of areas we've identified where there's benefits that we've managed to achieve through the N-1-50 standard, which we wouldn't be able to achieve through the N-1. So we have had a couple of examples where we've managed to do some reconfiguration which we wouldn't have been able to do previously.
And then I think there's another one there.
Hi, Selena Lyons from Origin. Question for Stuart. On your impact on the demand forecast for 25-26, you had 240 megawatts of storage affecting the peak. Is that predominantly utility scale or is it domestic scale?
We were probably more thinking of it being at domestic scale, is what we had in our minds. We were looking at it based on the response we got through the Queensland Household Energy Survey and people's interest in having storage behind the meter. So our assumptions were looking at around about, assuming 100,000 people had storage, and then X% being there at the time of peak, and then using the batteries to generate. So, but the focus was, or the mindset was, looking at more residential. But potentially there will be kind of larger industrial or battery storage as part of the network as well. And that's as we'll continue to monitor over the next few years, because it'll be a very dynamic environment, that one.
Probably time for one more question, just David.
Mark Askins, I'm on building in Queensland at the moment, but I'm currently on loan from SEQ Water. I was responsible technically for all the demand forecasting in the water, through the Water Commission and then into SEQ Water. Two things I noticed your forecast there. I've been grappling with population change, implications for Queensland. Are we shifting towards a low series versus medium series? And the second one is penetration rates. What we got wrong with the water industry is we didn't expect the penetration rates for efficiency to be so rampant and so quick. Mind you, it was supercharged during the restrictions. How much contingency or variation are you thinking could be in your forecasting in regards to uptake rate of new technologies such as battery storages on properties? I'll be probably one of them if the price drops to a certain level below, say, $5,000, so I would probably think about going off grid. And how much of that's going to happen en masse in southeast Queensland in particular?
First of all, please don't go off grid. There are a lot of benefits of staying connected. Looking at population growth, so yeah, but it's one of the factors that we do look at. I think looking at around about 5.5 million people being in Queensland in 10 years. So we're actually looking at the trend there in population. We've actually seen it slow down a bit in recent years, with slowing down the mining boom. What we've done with our modelling is we've been put those assumptions explicitly. We haven't actually put lower and higher bands on those particular factors. So in the case of storage, it was about 240 megawatts. So, but because of the uncertainty in those particular ones, we didn't want to then go and say, well, no, we think it's now going to be half that and much more of that. So we've stepped away from that at this particular point. We do have high and lows, which we take out of the economic models and looking at the economist's view of high growth and low growth. We use them to inform the highs and lows. But when it comes to the actual technology offsets, we didn't go down that particular path. But we made them explicit so that if you have an alternate view and you think that all of a sudden it's going to go from 240 megawatts to 500 megawatts, then you can make those adjustments and see what the impact will be.
All right, so I'd just like to thank both Stuart and Merrin for their presentations this morning. And obviously, if you have more questions,